Greetings everyone, Pseudo here, and it's time to get into some actual games. So, first up we have Donpork versus Maihem. Let's just start the game, and then we'll get into more details as the game goes underway. Alright, let's look first at the decks here. Looks like we're running some kind of blue jump, probably blue jump, but potentially a blue sevens from Donpork. And very telling of a red-yellow burn from Maihem, that brute, and another one as well. So, likely this will be a quick match, just by nature of burn being a win or die type of deck. Both of these players have quite a rich history within the Monthly Cup. Donpork having attended every one since Monthly Cup 7, which was for the month of December, and Maihem every Monthly Cup since number 5, which was in October. So, yeah, these that's 6 and 8 Monthly Cups for Donpork and Maihem respectively, and Maihem has been the champion of 2 of those. One of the few 2-time champions. Looks like Maihem taking his sweet time here. Excuse me, Donpork. It's Donpork's turn. I got so into the history, I missed whose turn it was. And he opts to not play Prophet. I expect fearing either Cypher's Wrath or Flameburst, and we see Maihem even has Flameburst in hand. And Maihem makes a very common red-yellow burn opener, Double Mountain Brute. This sets up collection and allows him to start putting some combat burn down. That brute deals 2 damage to face every time it gets combat. Donpork looking to go to the opposite side. And he plays Battletoads. This is good for collection. It's weak to area of effect, but I'm guessing Donpork isn't worried about that from Maihem. Red Yellow Burn is pretty unlikely to run any area of effect, but it does happen from time to time. The main concern I would have for Donpork is some kind of double Cypher's Wrath play from Maihem. But Donpork has to put something down, or he's going to start losing collection advantage, and he'll lose regardless of whether Maihem has those Cypher's Wraths or not. And we can see Maihem does not have those. Maihem hovering a desert. This is not surprising at all. He likely wants to get 2 mountains and 2 deserts up to allow him to play all of his creatures except for Spectre and all of his movement. Movement really allows the burn player here to take some favorable trades with his creatures, which allows more combat opportunities. And he plays a brute by his orb. I'm not really sure why he did that. Perhaps worried about some kind of Prophet of Tides Aurora play, which would allow Donpork to move his Toad and hit face for 6. He could have played a Prophet of Tides Mirror Phantasm, so I suppose he does save himself some damage here. Okay, I would say at this point, both players are kind of in a standoff. Neither player has made a strong play yet. Both lands are getting closer to each other by nature of the board. So at some point, we should see some advantage develop for one of these players. But at this point, it's really hard to determine. And looking at the cards, it's hard to determine what a good advantage play for Donpork might be. However, he has spotted one. And he denies collection from Maihem in the absence of movement. Now we do see Maihem as a flash win, but using it to collect is only really great if you're already ahead. He really wants to use that to trade. So Donpork here going for the collection advantage and denying 2 face damage from that combat proc. So at this point, Donpork does have the advantage. However, Maihem has time to respond. And he plays Cypher, which is usually just a 2/2 frog if you're playing against blue, because it's very unlikely that Cypher doesn't get frogified. But he plays it in the double collection spot and not as a combat creature, so this should help Maihem quite a bit. Donpork as blue has a number of options. 5 cards in hand thanks to that Spell Whirl. However, Azure Wisp and Egg of Wonders are not great. They're not great Spell Whirl cards. I'd be surprised if he plays either. Although if he plays Azure Wisp, it's a little bit more likely, because at least Azure Wisp can be used as a collector. And there's that Frogify on Cypher that I was talking about. And this puts Donpork really far ahead, because this is 2 turns now that Maihem has had no chance to collect. In the absence of movement, I should say. He has to expend a card out of his already small hand just to get a Feria. Maihem has some options. Well, I don't know. His options are bad and worse. He can, something I'm seeing, he could possibly Flame Burst that frog, which would deny double collection for Donpork. But Donpork's already pretty high on mana, and that would be a good trade for Donpork as far as the value of a frog compared to the value of a Flame Burst. So Maihem doesn't go for it. He just passes turn and moves towards collection. Donpork now with an almost fully reduced Colossus. 5 cost 7/7 is quite strong. The advantage here at this point is very strongly in Donpork's favor. Maihem would need some kind of AoE to come back, I think. Or the right spell cards. Perhaps double Cypher's play. He needs some way to clear the board. At the rate that things are going, I'm sure Donpork is very happy. However, with 8 Feria, I think the previous turn was kind of the last opportunity for Maihem to pull this back. The farther and farther behind Maihem gets, the bigger and bigger risks he's going to have to take. and the less likely it is that he'll be able to come back. For instance, now, even if he did get that full clear, there's a 7/7 in his face, or in position to clear the brute. At this point, Maihem really needs to respond to everything. He needs to respond to the 7/7, or he's not going to be able to have enough time to get his specters out. And he needs to respond to the double collection, or he's going to die. And again, not have time before he gets his specters out. With 6 Varia, he could Gift of Steel his brute and Flame Burst the 7/7 and get a collection. That would leave him only only 1 collection down. Single collecting compared to double collecting. And he does use the gift. And it looks like he's preparing to use Flame Burst. And he does. That was a decent response, and he has Maihem has Groundshaker in hand as well, so it's possible something could happen. However, Donpork, now sitting on 8 Varia, has a big opportunity here. With Phantasm in hand, he could deal 5 to face if he wants. And you can see he's very indecisive. Or he's just calculating. Sometimes I hover my cards as well and I'm calculating, though I've tried not to, since it does show your opponent which cards you have your mouse over. And I'm not really sure what other good options Donpork has here other than Mirror Phantasm to face, or that Gabrian Archon. I believe that Gabrian Archon is a 4/4 currently, but he has the Mirror Phantasm in hand to make that a 6/6 as well. And he even places it right next to the brute, threatening 10 more damage if Maihem doesn't respond. And you can see I was smart enough to show you that now now the Archon is a 6/6. Keep in mind this is a recorded game, obviously, so, well, not obviously. Maihem, with only 5 mana, with the cards in hand, he could deal quite a bit. Unfortunately, with only 5 Varia, he doesn't really have much to work with. He can probably only play 1 card, possibly 2 if he flash wins over. But he has to trade, and he takes the trade. So it's a double collection, but still taking 5 damage a turn. Perhaps hoping to double Flame Burst it next turn. And now that I think about it, maybe he's even planning to do some kind of Flash Wind play to hit face. I must say I like Chargers in Red Yellow Burn. It's an uncommon choice, but it used to be popular, and I like to run Chargers in my burn. I feel like it fits. Red Yellow Burn has a ton of events. Donpork looking to follow up with the Archon. Not surprising there. It's his last big body in hand. And with only 5 Feria plus collection for Mayhem next turn, it will be very difficult for him to respond. 7 Feria is definitely enough to kill one of them, but killing both will leave Mayhem in a very bad spot, especially with that library, which will put Donpork at 5 Feria as well, plus collection, and an additional card. So Mayhem here has to respond to lethal. He can't leave both of these creatures alive, and he certainly can clear them. He has double Flame Burst. He could double Flame Burst the Archon and kill the 5/5 with Charger. I think that might be his only option. If he plays a Ground Shaker, he won't have enough Feria to play anything else, and he'll lose. He could actually also play a Brute and body block Mayhem. And Mayhem seems, body block Donpork. So Mayhem seems pretty indecisive about this. Finally decides that library is a bigger threat than 5 damage, and settles just to kill one. I think at this point Donpork is fairly confident. Next turn Mayhem will only have 3 Feria, and 3 Feria and a Charger doesn't deal 16 damage. Charger can deal a lot of damage, but even with 3 events all being Campfire, which would be a bonus attack on top of the 8/8 that it's maxed out to, or the 8 damage that's maxed out to, that would still only be 11 damage, and it's very unlikely that Mayhem is running Campfires. Donpork searching for lethal. And just settling to set up lethal for the next turn. This is likely Mayhem's final turn. He either has to kill Donpork or somehow clear 10 HP off of the board with 3 Feria. Another thing to note is that Donpork now has Emperor's Command in hand. So even if he was taking some burn damage here and there, that 4 health heal is quite strong against the burn. Mayhem draws. And he has an opportunity to deny lethal on board. Time ticking down. And Donpork pulls another big body, draws again for Ninja Toad, hoping for lethal this turn. And he's just one short of lethal. But Maihem with only 4 Faria and nothing on board. It's very unlikely, and we can even see from his hand. And that's a victory. Alright, let me do this real quick. And I'm still testing this out, so we'll see how this, how quick I can switch things up. Just give me a moment while I open up the next clip, and voila, game 2. Maybe fast forward a little bit here. I'm not exactly sure. There it is. Not exactly sure when the game starts. I have to start the recording before it starts. Okay. For those unaware of the tournament format here, this is the Monthly Cup 12, which uses the Pantheon tournament format, in which you bring 3 decks with essentially no overlap. The basic rules are you can have up to 3 of each card except legendaries, which you can only have 1 of. So essentially a single deck's worth of cards, and you can have 3 of those. So you can't run 3 Ninja Toads in your blue deck, in your blue jump deck, and 3 Ninja Toads in your blue Reaver deck. So for this reason, we'll often see players going different colors so that they can pull the strong cards from each color. And then the follow-up to that is, if you lose, you switch decks. If you win, you stay on the same deck. So we see Donpork won. He's still running blue jump. And Maihem lost and has now switched to green yellow sack, which I believe, if I can check this correctly, yes, which he won the last Monthly Cup with. Monthly Cup 11 was won with a reverse sweep, or it wasn't quite a reverse sweep. Maihem was down 1-2, pulled out his green yellow sack, and managed to pull another 2 games out for the win. So clearly happy with that choice, and brings it again this month. Both players setting up in expected ways, given the decks that they are playing. Donpork pulling out the RNG whirl, and he gets an Archon from that. As you can see from the Archon on the left, he already is running Archons in this deck. So that's quite a good pull for him. That's going to be another 6/6 body, most likely. And we can see this play, Donpork pulling a huge advantage here with the turn 3 clear, setting up triple collect for the next turn. Maihem definitely needs some kind of response here. Killing that Bone Collector at 1-3 is a huge deal against a sack deck. It's very rare that it ever stays 1-3, even for one turn. Often it's immediately played and buffed to a 2-4. So only taking 1 damage on the elemental and being able to kill the Bone Collector in a single hit as opposed to allowing it to get 2 hits off or 3 hits off. And we can see here just what I'm talking about. He plays the Bone Collector and immediately buffs it to 2-4. That's a much more common occurrence. So at this point, Donpork has the collection advantage and is setting up pretty well the board that he would like. I think the only missing piece at this point is a well. A lake near the opponent's well. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a double neutral on the right side here in preparation of setting up that lake. Double Archon is a bit unfortunate this early. If Donpork can hold on and wait to use those until they're 6-6, they'll be much stronger than playing a 4-4 for 4. But still, it's not terrible stats, and it has charge 2. So it's basically a Mace Man with charge 2 at this point, with the potential to grow. So Donpork starts clearing, takes a moderately valuable trade, trading his 3-2 into a 5-2. He loses a body, but he replaces it with another one, setting up now a quadruple collect. And the more collections that Donpork can get, the more often he can draw after he's set up his lands. So I would expect one more land, that lake by the well that I was talking about, and then pretty much drawing as much as possible. Now, Maihem does have an option for his own value trade, trading that 2-1 into the 2-2. And it looks like he's setting up to do so, moving the Bone Collector to ensure that he gets the buff. Makes the trade and plays the Seedling, which he got from his Bloom Sprite. For anyone who doesn't know, since Seedling is a bit of an uncommon card, I'll just explain it real quick. Every turn, at the beginning of the turn, it gains 1/1 as long as it has less than 5 life. So what you can do with it is, obviously, if you do nothing, it becomes a 4/5 after 4 turns. But say you attack something, say it's a 1/1, you know, a farm boy, for instance. It then goes down to a 4/4, which means on the next turn, it goes back up to a 5/5. So you can see Donpork really respecting that growth and just clearing it with a Ninja Toad. On the other hand, it was also a very valuable trade, since at the time it did 0 damage to his Ninja Toad, giving him free value. I don't exactly know if that's the right term there, but his Ninja Toad is completely healthy and in a good position to make another trade. Maihem almost beyond the response phase. I don't know what to call this, but this is kind of what shows in the this is kind of the center of the turn 4 theory here. You can see Maihem needs to respond. He needs to clear the board, get collections, but he just has no Faria to do so. So Donpork really sitting in a good position here. He has the option to hit face, but he opts to collect. That ought to tell you something about how strong collection is in the game of Faria. Most games are not won in a race to kill the other player. Most games are won by one player establishing a solid board control and then killing the other player. And you can see Donpork attempting to do just that. Plays both of his creatures, empties his hand. Both of them being 4/4s, quite sturdy. Oh well, not quite sturdy, moderately sturdy. I've been thinking about what is a sturdy creature, and I think 4 health is a sturdy creature because 3 health is weak to many of Fred's removal. Their AoE, Flame Burst. 2 is very fragile. It's weak to pretty much all removal with the exception of Falcon Dive and Emperor's Command. And so 4 is just above that threshold. It's a pretty sturdy. And I'm thinking 7 is a very sturdy because double AoE doesn't hit it, AoE Flame Burst doesn't hit it. You pretty much need 3 instances of damage to kill it, except in the uncommon case of Bomb Slinger and Firebomb. Now, I also need to point out that another thing that can happen is the player with no board control, in this case Maihem, sometimes has to try to race, basically. Donpork has just an iron grip on board control. Maihem playing his 9/9 Soul Eater forces Donpork to respond. Donpork can no longer sit back, collect, draw, get the cards that he wants. He now has to respect this 9/9 in his face, which could easily become a 10/10 if Maihem manages to have a sack creature and a creature which sacrifices another creature in his hand. We can see that Maihem does not have that, but Donpork doesn't have that luxury. And Donpork dumping bodies onto the board, playing everything he can in an attempt to stop these Soul Eaters here. And Maihem draws another one. Maihem at this point has no board control. He could start trying to clear the board with those big creatures, but if Donpork pulls a Frogify or something, then Donpork is going to be right back on top. So it's very likely Maihem will do just that, what we just saw, hitting face, and plays another one, setting up lethal for next turn. And we should be careful to note that he has Dream Fanatic. I almost said Templar there. Dream Fanatic in his hand, which will allow him to move his Soul Eaters even if there's some kind of body block here. So Donpork really needs to play this just right, and even then he might not be able to survive. He pulls a one Faria Wave Crash Colossus, which is normally quite good, but unfortunately in this instance it's going to take a turn to use that Colossus, and he doesn't really have a turn. He definitely would like to get a Frogify. I wouldn't be surprised to see a second draw here. Although if he does draw a second time, actually I suppose not, because even if he were to Frogify one of the Soul Eaters and kill it, the other Soul Eater would then be a 10-10. Mayhem could then sacrifice his Village Elder to make it an 11-11, and that would give him lethal. So even Frogify I don't think would save him here. And he moves into body block, and he plays a forward Colossus, which is out of range of face, but actually sets up lethal due to that Prophet of Tides. However, we see that it won't matter because Mayhem has, as I mentioned in the previous turn, Fanatic in hand. I am a bit surprised he doesn't see this right away, or maybe he did see it and he just was I don't know what he was thinking about, but it turns out it was a very close game, a close race, due to, you could almost say, lucky draws of the Soul Eater. But even with those draws, Mayhem had to make the choice to race there, and he did, and it paid off. So now we get to go into game 3, tied at 1-1. Give me a moment while I open this up, and here we go. Let's see if, oh, I got it pretty quick this time. Okay, I'm going to try to follow my casting routine a little bit more strictly here, so that I can develop some good habits for future casting. Please keep in mind this is a pretty new adventure for me, so definitely give me some tips, but make them constructive. I definitely won't be taking destructive criticism. I don't think that's good for anybody to take. Donpork forced to switch out of blue jump. Both players looking to win 2 more games. This is a best of 5, not a best of 3. And Donpork's choice, his next choice is, it looks like a red rush. Imperial Drain is a pretty common non-yellow rush card. Lou pointed out, this was months ago, but people didn't understand Imperial Drain. Thought, wow, it's so bad, you know. Imperial Drain is basically the Khalim's Prayer of non-yellow. It denies your opponent 2 Faria that you were not going to collect anyways, which gives you a 2 Faria advantage. The only thing it doesn't do is draw. And, of course, it takes 2 turns to play out. But you can see he plays this, and this is going to do a little mini starve on Mayhem. Even though Mayhem has the collection position, he's not getting collection out of it. Alright, I would say at this point, because of the Imperial Drain, neither player really has much of an advantage. If I were to give any player an advantage, it would be Mayhem at this point, simply because he has a card advantage. Donpork had to play a card to deny the Feria advantage, so not a very big advantage. But every little advantage matters. And here's that second set of no wells here. The other advantage that might go to Mayhem here is that he has special lands. However, I'm not sure that's really worth considering because Donpork only needs 2 mountains total. Mayhem is going to need 6 special lands, 3 forests, and 3 deserts. So even though Donpork spent 2 turns building double neutrals, he still only has 2 special lands to go, while Mayhem has another 4. Or 3 if you count the same turns, since Mayhem is going second here. So only a one land advantage. But that's pretty typical of Rush. That's why you don't often see multicolor Rush decks, because having to build 4 lands plus double neutral or 2 double neutrals can really hurt you. The biggest exception, I would say, is the green-yellow Rush, which is less of a Rush deck and more of an OTK combo deck. Which, if you watch the monthly cup, then Mino, I never said his name out loud. I just realized Mino Caro will tell you it's a green-yellow combo, not a green-yellow Rush. Facetiously, of course, because we all know it's really a Rush deck. Okay, back to this game though. Mayhem, or excuse me, Donpork's the one playing, opts to get that buff on his Axe Grinder. And finally dumps his Feria here. He definitely needs to start clearing these sack creatures, which on the one hand seems okay, and on the other is a problem, because well, first of all, Eridon, as you can see, that 3/3 that's currently highlighted, I guess there's 3 highlighted right now. The 3/3 in the top right next to Mayhem's Orb will give a 1/1 buff to all of Mayhem's creatures in his hand and deck, so the next creatures that he will play. So on the one hand, you need to clear that to hit face, and on the other hand, you really don't want to clear that. And Mayhem, you can even see, clears it himself, because that's very good value for him. And the other point that I was going to say is every sack creature that you clear is a buff to that Soul Eater. So definitely this is looking grim for Donpork at the moment. Mayhem considering playing another Demon Wrangler, and he plays an Assassin, and very strange to me that he did not buff that. I'm not sure why. I suppose he preserved, he values the Bone Collector over the Protection Orb, or, as is always possible, he misclicked. But I think he seemed to play very intentionally, and I don't think that was a misclick. Still, it is a 3/3 with Death Touch. Donpork has to get something done here. 14 health still left on Mayhem. 12 if you factor in Cypher's Wrath. And no burned creatures currently on board. Donpork could kill the Bone Collector right now with the Cypher's Wrath. And with the Axe Grinder. And he does. But this leaves him with only one creature on board, and a creature that Mayhem can get a value trade on. Perhaps Donpork hoping he'll draw a Ground Shaker next turn, which if he got 2 Faria from the Brigand, 3 Faria from Initial, and press the +1 button on the power wheel, he could potentially clear that assassin. The advantage at this point, I think, goes strongly to Mayhem. The only advantage at this point that Donpork has is that 8 damage that he's dealt to face so far, and Mayhem having no heal in hand. However, I don't see how that 12 damage is going to happen anytime soon, considering that Donpork has only a Gift of Steel in hand, and now nothing to play it on. Mayhem setting up double collection, actually double collecting, and then moving that 5/2 likely into the double collect position on the far left side. Donpork with Cypher, unfortunately, there's a twofold error here, or issue, not error. For one, Mayhem has a Death Touch on board, which, aside from transforming Cypher, is one of the best ways to kill him. And 2, every creature of Mayhem's has an additional attack, which Cypher does not gain. So Cypher's health will go down much more quickly against all these sack creatures. And Mayhem setting up more defensively, covers both of Donpork's mountains. This is subtle but powerful. What this does is it forces Donpork to make a 3rd mountain. Donpork really doesn't want to make more mountains than he has to, and he only needs 2 mountains to play anything. So that 3rd mountain is gonna stop him from drawing. It's gonna stop him from using +1. It denies power wheel advantage. It's a new term I'm trying out. This is the first time I've ever said it publicly. Power wheel advantage is a card advantage or a Faria advantage, in the sense that you get to choose the one that you need. So in this sense, it's a bigger it's a bigger theory that I'm working on here, and I'm sure you will hear about it when it is more detailed. But currently, just something to note is that stepping on all of Donpork's lands denies him power wheel advantage. He's forced to make that mountain. and likely going to play Cypher. It's not a great play, but Donpork's really kind of out of great plays. He pretty much has to do something. You can see the decision between Cypher and Underground Boss is difficult. Underground Boss gets you more Feria, but probably dies a lot quicker. Cypher, it's great, probably dies a little bit slower, can deal some more damage to face. As we can see, Maihem with only 10 health kind of has to respawn to 5 damage in his face. But it might just get Last Nightmared. Now we can see obviously Maihem doesn't have Last Nightmare, but it's not uncommon for a sack deck to run 1 or 2 Last Nightmares. Now Maihem has been sort of in control for the last couple of turns, but he does have to respond, as I said, to that 5 damage. If he takes another 5 damage to face, Donpork, it's very possible for Donpork to just draw into 2 Flame Bursts and win the game right there. So that would definitely turn what right now I would consider a massive advantage for Maihem into a loss, similar to the way the last game ended. But you can see Maihem can respond quite easily because of that Aerodon buff. Normally when Soldier deals 2 damage to Cypher, if Cypher doesn't die, because he takes 3 damage and only gains 1 health, but in this case he took 4 damage and still only gained 1 health because you only gain the base stats, not that Aerodon buff. So took a lot of damage, and Maihem stepping back, protecting his face, and dealing 4 damage of his own to Donpork's. And a little bit interesting to me that he plays this Elder in the collection spot. I think this is a situational decision here. He's seen, okay, Donpork only has 4 Feria. Red is not likely to have haste, so it's safe for him to leave that space open in front of his orb. Or it's probable that it's safe. So that 4, he definitely has to kill that. It won't be difficult, but he has to, because if that does 4 damage to face, it also has 2 damage on death. So definitely Donpork demanding some responses here as a rush deck. Unfortunately, Maihem with such a powerful position that those responses are not difficult for him to get. Or for him to make, I should say. I wouldn't be surprised to see at least another 4 damage to face, possibly set up that Bone Collector with the Demon Wrangler. And he actually uses the Demon Wrangler on a close creature, I guess planning to preserve his Death Touch for a more serious threat. And he draws into another Demon Wrangler, so this is quite good for him. Now he can set up this Village Elder, and he can turn that into a 5/2 as well. And actually, I stand corrected, he opts to use the Death Touch 3/3. And we can hear Maihem drawing Soul Eater, forcing him to not be able to hit face for a long time afterwards, but he does manage to do it. And interestingly enough, this probably alerts Donpork that Maihem has Soul Eater in hand, but I'm not sure it really matters at this point. Donpork needs... actually, I stand corrected. I shouldn't be too hasty. If Donpork draws next turn into a Flame Burst and a Cypher's Wrath, well, not anymore now because it doesn't matter. But a Flameburst, Cypher's Wrath, Flameburst could have been that 8 damage that he needed, but Mayhem not going to allow that. Just finds lethal and ends the game. So let's go to game number 4. Currently 2-1 with Mayhem in the lead, taking 2 wins with his sack deck, which did so well for him in the last monthly cup as well. So clearly this has been a strong deck for him in this tournament on multiple occasions. Now we see Donpork's third and final deck. He has to win 2 games with this deck if he wants to advance over Mayhem. Okay. I've kind of given all the background information that I know at this point, so I guess we can just watch for their openings, and maybe I could focus on not saying and focusing on this cycle. Oh, I said it again. This cycle that I'm hoping to develop. Donpork running what looks like mono green currently. Man, I said again. Given his hand, but this hand also fits Crackthorn, which I would expect to be much more likely in the monthly cup. Nothing surprising out of either player. And a Living Willow, that's a very uncommon card in Crackthorn, so perhaps he is just running mono green. And Donpork sets up double collect for next turn, with also the threat of killing that Bloom Sprite if Mayhem doesn't do anything with it. But Mayhem has both a Bone Collector, I was going to say and an Assassin, but actually he can't play that Assassin until he has another Desert. So just opting to forego the collection for this turn, and with so many green cards, I think this is a mono green deck from Donpork here. Now, notice Donpork did save his Emperor's Command. He could have denied collection completely by using Emperor's Command on that 1/1. But that would also give a buff to one of Mayhem's creatures. So from the Spirit of Rebirth, so not really interested in that kind of trade. And kind of a standoff here. Both players meeting in the top left corner. This is Mayhem's 4th turn. Shout out to turn 4. The team on which I currently am on. I wouldn't be surprised to see Mayhem make some moves here. Looking at his cards, he could double Wind Soldier to kill that 1/7, but that would be quite a lot of Faria invested into a 3 Faria creature. However, he would get buffs from his Bone Collector, and it looks like he actually is going for that play. Ah, I kind of forgot actually about this. Every creature that's dying here is actually giving +2/+2 in terms of value, because he gets 1/1 on the Bone Collector as well as 1/1 on his creatures in hand. Now, he was taking a bit of a risk there. If he got a 1/1 on his Wind Soldier, then he wouldn't have been able to sacrifice his Bloom Sprite. As is, I think this is preferable for Mayhem. But he did just take a Wild Growth from Bloom Sprite. Not really a card you're looking for. But it does mean he won't have to build any more forests unless he wants a forward forest. Donpork, on the other hand, has built up a giant bank here. 14 Faria. Unfortunately, he just has nothing in hand to play. Going for a bit of a value trade and trying to deny future value out of that Spirit of Rebirth here. Feeds the forest on his Sagami Grove Collar, hoping to draw into something that he can play, and he gets another Sagami Grove Collar. Looks like he's even considering playing it, pulling back that elemental, letting it live to fight another day. And Mayhem just looking to continue his sack cycle. I don't know what else to call it. Sack train. Basically, he's got 5 Faria, and he's looking to sacrifice some stuff. But he doesn't really have any good sacrifice creatures in hand. It looks like he's opting to play the Demon Wrangler as a sacrifice creature, which loses a little bit of value, but it does only cost 2 Faria, so it's not a terrible deal on that one. And now he has 2 pretty solid collectors, very sturdy, or at least the Bone Collector currently is very sturdy by the definition that I'm trying to use here, and Assassin is just sturdy, reaching that perfect 4 health mark, although it doesn't really matter against green because green has very few removal cards. However, Donpork finally pulls something tanky and puts down a Golem. I haven't done the math myself, but I believe it's the most valuable creature stat per Faria. But I don't know that. I'm just guessing that because it costs 5 forests and it's green, and green's thing is value, stat value per Faria. So definitely, if there's another creature that has better stat value per Faria, put it in the comments, because I am interested to know. And I don't know if I'll ever actually get around to doing the math on that. Someday I probably will, though. Mayhem putting down his 3rd desert and using that wild growth for his 3rd forest, as well as an additional one, and gets pretty good random drops here. Actually goes right into the well. Perhaps the only better position would be the forest between the wells being just below that other forest next to the well, allowing him to put that Soul Eater in a better position, but he does play the Soul Eater because he's running a bit low on cards here. And even though he has one side, Mayhem has managed to use that golem to great effect to conquer the other side. So both players kind of holding one side down here, which in some sense gives Donpork the advantage here, despite Mayhem being able to keep the sack train up. Donpork, in the absence of that Soul Eater, Donpork would have this clear advantage with side owned and 10 Feria to go. As it is, with that Soul Eater, Mayhem has managed to pull quite a bit of value out of his sack cycles, and definitely looking to put some damage on face, onto Donpork's face, and threaten lethal here. Donpork moving his taunt in position so that the Soul Eater can't hit face unless he either clears it, which we can see Mayhem could do if he chooses to do so, or has a movement trick. And Mayhem chooses to clear. He doesn't have the option even to do a movement trick. And he moves that 4/4 Death Touch up, really hoping to get a hit on into that 7/9. That would be definitely the best way that Mayhem can currently deal with that. But Donpork doesn't really have a good way to deal with that assassin. He can remove the bubble, but Emperor's Command, if you're not aware, doesn't deal damage. This is a double-edged sword. When Assassin is a 1/1, Emperor's Command will kill it right away for free. Regardless of that, regardless of the protection. That's the word I'm looking for. But as is, it won't remove the protection and will instead just lower it to a 2/3, which doesn't really matter to Mayhem, because as long as that Death Touch can deal 1 damage, it's going to kill whatever it hits. Donpork does set up a taunt though. Gives him a turn. He's likely to lose that 7/9. I think he's just kind of surrendered that 7/9 in an attempt to both clear the assassin and just hit face for 7. And Mayhem pulls another Soul Eater. This is pretty lucky here. Only 12 cards in and 2 Soul Eaters. That's a little bit above average if you consider 1 Soul Eater every 10 cards being average. So just barely, right? On average, you'd expect a Soul Eater at 25, 15, and 5 or something, you know, from a probability perspective. So this is very strong for him. Allows him to clear that 3/4 and possibly set up lethal. Well, he can clear the 3/4 with his 8/8, but still set up lethal with the Soul Eater. We do see, though, that in the absence of another sack, these 2 creatures that Donpork has can clear that other Soul Eater. So he can deny lethal, and he actually I totally forgot he had another assassin in hand, so he does manage the sack. Donpork will have to use that Tiki Caretaker if he wants to kill that Soul Eater, or he could use Tethra. And I believe the mistake that Mayhem is referring to here is that he did not hit that 3/4. Which, yeah, that's definitely going to slow him down a turn. Although we can see from our perspective that it doesn't really have any effect. Donpork is likely to just kill that Soul Eater anyways. But with Tethra, perhaps you could save. Let's see, 5 plus 3 is 8, so maybe he could buff his Golem and hit 10 onto the Soul Eater, and then hope for Grove Collar. Thinking, man, it's amazing. I do get more and more tired to more games go on. I'm definitely just doing one series today here, and then I'll cast more over time. So he opts to use the Tiki instead of the Tethra, and you can see there what I was talking about earlier. He uses the command to kill the assassin instantly. And I believe Donpork's mistake was that he did not hit face with that 2/2. We'll have to see if that becomes critical or not. It'll only really matter if he's 2 damage short of lethal. 2 damage isn't really significant, but putting him down to 11 definitely could, it's hard to say. Maihem going over his options. He has Soul Eater in hand. He can double collect. He can clear the forward, which he does. He clears the forward creature, and there's the double collect. And opts for better positioning with his Soul Eater. This puts him 2 damage out of lethal, with the potential of 2 creatures on board, if perhaps he can sack them somehow and find lethal that way. The advantage right now, I would say, is strongly in Mayhem's favor. Not just because of that Soul Eater, but Maihem is also sitting right now on double collection, while Donpork is only on single collection. Donpork does have a decent Varia bank here, so we'll have to see what he chooses to do. Stepping up, hoping for double collection, most likely next turn. And I'm not sure, well, yeah, I wasn't sure what he was really thinking, and I guess he wasn't either. He just passed his turn, and actually, I did know what he was thinking. When I was casting this game, there I highlight Tethra. Thank you, past pseudo. Very informative. Donpork passing, hoping to get some kind of play off with that Tethra. Perhaps hoping to collect and +1 if he gets some kind of Sagami. Maybe, do some he could hit lethal with his Golem if he can teleport it in range and Tethra on it. So I think just planning ahead, hoping that he can get a shot in to finish him off. Maihem making a play that seems it's expected. It's not a surprising play there. I'm sure he was giving it time, hoping to see if he could somehow fine lethal. He did have the Wind Soldier for 12. He could have gotten up to 12 damage, but as it was, there wasn't quite a way to get 13 damage out of there. Donpork looking to use Tethra. Now I should note, and I did see this when I was casting it, Maihem has lethal in hand if Donpork doesn't position things right. Maihem could double land across the center and use that Wind Soldier plus the Fanatic to reach face. So it's really critical that Donpork body blocks correctly here, and I didn't think that he would think of it. It's kind of a strange line. I'm not sure how difficult it is to see. Having seen it from the observer's perspective, I'm not sure how difficult it would be to see from the player's perspective. But as we can see now, Donpork didn't body block quite right. He's got 2 bodies on either side, and that's a win for Maihem. A little bit of a mini spot lethal puzzle for you there. Not too hard, I hope, but still, you know, difficult enough that it's not likely that Donpork would have seen it, I guess. I'm not very good at spotting opponents' lethals at times, especially from hand, unless it's something simple like double flame burst. So yeah, I'm not really surprised Donpork didn't play around that, but it was unfortunate for Donpork. However, very fortunate for Maihem, and Maihem moves on to the round of 16. I guess I should have stated this. I want to do this all in one take, so I'm not going to redo this, but this is the first in the series, in the Monthly Cup Extras series that I'm doing. Just a short little series, one series from each round that I was able to get in and record thanks to Atmaz, and then an additional series recorded by Yotsuba, who was in the Monthly Cup and also is an active participant in the Turn 4 Discord, although he is in I need to look up his team again, because I think his team name is long, and I don't really want to mess it up or get it wrong. So I will just leave that out here, and I'll definitely give him the shoutouts when I'm actually casting his game. So I hope you all enjoyed this, and definitely let me know what kind of changes I could make. I know there's room for improvement. I'm going to rewatch this myself, and I've got 5 more series to cast, although 2 of those were streamed on the main stream, the 3rd, 4th place match and the finals match. But I will cast them myself as well, just to put my own style on it and get the extra practice on it. So yeah, thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.